My parents disowned me because I marched for Palestine on the Sydney Harbour Bridge. But the truth is, they weren't scared for my safety. They were scared I'd find out what they'd been hiding. On that cool winter morning, I stood shoulder to shoulder with thousands, flags waving, chants echoing across the harbor, the bridge trembling under our footsteps. We marched for justice. We marched for freedom. We marched because silence was no longer an option. By sundown, my phone was blowing up, not with support, but with insults. My father's voice on the line. "You've embarrassed the family. Don't come home." My mother crying, saying I'd made us a target. And just like that, I was erased from every family chat. But then, a journalist friend slipped me something, leaked documents. My uncle, a senior politician, lobbying to criminalize the very protest I joined. And buried inside those files, proof he was profiting from a redevelopment deal that would force dozens of Palestinian Australian families from their homes. They disowned me to keep me quiet, but instead, they gave me every reason to burn their empire to the ground. Chapter 1. The Catalyst. Why I Marched. It started weeks earlier. A late-night scroll through my phone, the screen lit with images I couldn't unsee. Children pulled from rubble, mothers weeping in bomb-shattered streets. And then, a live stream from Gaza, a man my age speaking through the chaos, his voice shaking as he said, "Please, don't forget us." A week later, I met a group of Palestinian Australian students at uni. Over coffee, they told me about their families, about relatives overseas, and about cousins here in Sydney who were quietly losing their homes to developers backed by the government. Their fight wasn't just in Gaza, it was here, on our streets, in our postcodes. So when the call went out, a mass march across the Sydney Harbour Bridge, I didn't hesitate. This was more than a political statement. It was a stand for humanity. I painted my sign, tied a keffiyeh around my neck, and told myself, no more silence. That morning, the air was crisp, the kind that makes your lungs sting with each breath. Thousands gathered, flags whipping in the wind, chants rising like a heartbeat. Strangers smiled at each other, linked arms, and moved as one. For the first time in months, I felt like I belonged. I didn't know it yet, but in less than 12 hours, that same bridge would carry me straight into a war with my own blood. Chapter 2. The Breaking Point. By the time I got home from the march, my phone was a grenade in my pocket, buzzing with missed calls, text notifications stacking up like warning signs. I thought maybe friends had seen me on the news. I was wrong. Dad's voice came first, low, sharp, like a blade dragged across stone. "You've embarrassed this family. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I started to explain why I'd marched, who I'd met, what it meant, but he cut me off. "You've made us a target. Don't come home tonight." Then came Mum. Her voice trembled, but it wasn't anger, it was fear. "Please, delete your posts. Keep your head down. You don't understand who you're up against." She didn't have to say it. I knew she meant my uncle. That night, my phone lit up again. Uncle Rob. He'd never called me directly before. His voice was calm, calculated, the kind of tone that hides the real message between the lines. "You're playing with fire, kid. You don't want to be on the wrong side of this." Then he hung up. By morning, I was gone from the family WhatsApp group. My cousin unfollowed me on Instagram. Aunt Julie, who used to bake me birthday cakes, posted a Facebook rant about youth being brainwashed by extremists. And me? I sat in my tiny flat, scrolling through the footage of the march, wondering how something so right could make my own family treat me like I didn't exist. I didn't realize it then, but my uncle wasn't just angry about my politics. He was scared because my presence on that bridge had brought me dangerously close to the truth he'd spent years hiding. Chapter 3: The Isolation. The week after the march felt like a slow-motion freefall. Friends stopped replying to my messages. Group chats went quiet when I entered. Even people who'd once called me brave now avoided eye contact in the uni corridor. By Friday, my boss called me into his office. He didn't even sit down. "We're letting you go. You've brought too much visibility to yourself and to us." No severance, just a box for my things and a polite "good luck" on the way out. That night, my landlord sent a text. "We'll be reviewing your lease next month." Translation: start packing. The walls of my little Newtown flat felt like they were closing in, not from the space shrinking, but from the sudden absence of anyone to lean on. Online wasn't any better. My DMs filled with messages from strangers calling me a traitor, a terror sympathizer, telling me to go back where I came from, which was laughable considering I was born at Westmead Hospital. For days, I barely left the flat. I'd sit cross-legged on the carpet, watching footage of the march on loop, trying to remember why I'd felt so alive that day. But the more I replayed it, the more I noticed something I hadn't before. In the background, just beyond the flags and the chanting, a group of suited men watching from the edge of the bridge. And in the middle of them, my Uncle Rob, hands clasped behind his back, smiling. Not the warm smile I knew from childhood barbecues. No, this was the smile of someone who knew more than he was saying. Chapter 4: The Spark of Revenge. It happened on a Wednesday night. I was halfway through a packet of Tim Tams, trying to forget the week, when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I saw you at the march. You need to see this. Don't tell anyone." Attached with 3 PDF files, government letterhead, and my uncle's name stamped across every page. I opened the first file. It was a briefing note for a proposed amendment, one that would make organizing large-scale unauthorized protests punishable by up to 2 years in prison. The second file? A list of lobbyists backing the amendment, most of them developers and property investors. And the third file made my blood run cold. It was a confidential report on a $400 million redevelopment project, the same one Palestinian Australian families had been fighting for months. Buried in the appendices was proof that my uncle had lobbied to rezone their neighborhood, clearing the way for luxury apartments. Those families weren't just losing their homes overseas, they were being pushed out right here in Sydney. That's when it clicked. My uncle hadn't been angry about me marching for Palestine. He'd been terrified because the protest shone a spotlight on the very people he was in bed with. My presence on that bridge threatened to unravel everything. I stared at those documents for hours. My hands shook, not from fear, but from something sharper. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to delete my posts. And I sure as hell wasn't going to keep his secrets. If my uncle wanted silence, I was about to give him the loudest truth Sydney had ever heard. Chapter 5. The Strike. I knew I couldn't just drop the documents and hope for the best. If I was going to hit my uncle, I had to make it hurt. Publicly, irreversibly, and in a way he could never cover up. I spent 2 sleepless nights cross-referencing the files with public records, building a timeline that linked his lobbying against the march directly to the redevelopment deal. I added photos from the protest, clips of Palestinian-Australian families telling their stories, and every signature, every date, every dollar from those documents. Then, on a Saturday morning, I uploaded a 10-minute video to TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. The title? Why My Uncle Wants to Silence the March. Within an hour, it had 50,000 views. By midday, major protest organizers were sharing it. By nightfall, it was on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald. The hashtags exploded. Hashtag Harbour Bridge Truth. Hashtag Protest Rights. Hashtag Stop the Sell-Off. Every news outlet was running the same headline. MP linked to housing displacement of migrant families. My uncle's office released a statement calling it misinformation, but by then, the documents were everywhere. Mum called me, her voice sharp with panic. "Take it down before you ruin everything!" But the truth was out now, and for the first time since the march, I didn't feel alone. Outside Parliament House, thousands gathered, not just for Palestine, but for our right to march. As I stood in the crowd, hearing strangers chant my words from the video, I realized my uncle had tried to silence one protester. Instead, he'd created an army. Chapter 6. The Reckoning. By Monday morning, every news network in Australia had my uncle's face on their screens. The footage wasn't flattering. Him storming past reporters, refusing to answer questions, a thin sheen of sweat catching the sunlight. In Parliament, opposition MPs demanded a formal inquiry into his lobbying and financial ties. Protesters camped outside his electorate office, holding signs that read, "Housing is a human right." And the media kept replaying my video. Every signature, every date, every dollar of that redevelopment deal. By the end of the week, my uncle announced he was taking leave for health reasons. The papers called it what it was, a political retreat. His business partners scrambled to distance themselves. The redevelopment project was officially put on hold, pending investigation. But the best part? The proposed anti-protest amendment died in committee. Without my uncle pushing it, there was no political appetite for it. We hadn't just stopped a bad law, we'd protected the right to march for years to come. Mum stopped calling. Dad sent one text. "You've gone too far." Maybe they thought that would shame me. But as I stood on the steps of Town Hall, surrounded by people chanting for justice, I realized something. I didn't need their approval anymore. Because for the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. I was part of something bigger. Chapter 7. Full Circle. Exactly 1 year later, I stood on the Sydney Harbour Bridge again. Same winter air, same roaring wind, same steady drumbeat of thousands of feet on steel. But this time, I wasn't just a face in the crowd. I was at the front, Microphone in hand, a banner stretched above my head. People I'd never met before shouted my name, waved, and held up signs quoting my words from that first viral video. Somewhere near the edge of the bridge, I saw them, my mum and dad, standing together, silent, watching me. Mum's hands were clasped at her chest. Dad's eyes never left mine. They didn't smile, they didn't wave, but they were there. I raised the microphone, my voice carrying over the hum of the wind. Last year, I was told to keep quiet. I was told to go home, to stop making noise. But the truth doesn't need permission to be heard. The crowd erupted, the sound echoing off the steel and into the sky. I took one last look toward my parents, and I knew, whether they forgave me or not, I had already won. My uncle had tried to silence the march. He had tried to silence me, but all he had done was make the truth louder. As we stepped forward, flags snapping in the wind, drums pounding like a heartbeat, I felt it. The bridge beneath me was no longer a place of exile. It was home. The bridge and beyond. People ask me if I regret it. The march, the fallout with my family, the war I started with my uncle. I tell them the same thing every time. You can't regret the truth. In the years since that first protest, the redevelopment project collapsed completely. Several of my uncle's associates were charged with corruption. The families in that Sydney neighborhood, they still live there. They've even started a community garden on the empty lot where the developers once promised luxury apartments. I still don't speak much to my parents. Sometimes Mum sends a photo of the dog or a recipe she thinks I'll like. Dad stays silent. But silence doesn't scare me anymore. I've learned that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who stands beside you when the wind turns cold. And the bridge? It's not just steel and rivets to me now. It's a reminder that no matter how heavy the truth feels, it can carry you, if you're brave enough to walk it. There are still fights ahead, other laws they'll try to pass in quiet rooms, but I'm ready for them. Because I know now, the truth doesn't just survive the fire, it spreads.